Okay, we're ready to get started. So as you're settling down, we want to again remind you that lunch is on your own, and there's actually a food court downstairs with all of your fast food favorites. There's also a sort of cafeteria style restaurant on this floor as well called the Cactus Grill, so you can find a nice menu there too. Also downstairs, besides the food court, there's also a Mexican restaurant that you can partake for lunch. So anyway, so lunch is on your own, and then we'll have dinner together this evening. Also earlier, we had a request from one of our participants about having introductions for all of you out there. And so we won't have time to do that this morning, but we will make time at this evening's dinner for informal introductions by participants. People just want to know where people are from. So, we'll allow time for that. But certainly, I know many of you know each other, and many of you are meeting for the first time. So I think this is a wonderful opportunity for that, just to meet socially, and of course, do what is everyone's favorite pastime, is to network. So we encourage that throughout the day. So everyone will be on certainly friend level by the end of the conference. We're all very happy about that. So let's see, our first panel, and this is the panel, first formal panel for our conference, and this is where as I said, I will be the good teacher and remind you to take good notes, list your questions, whether you ask the question or not. Certainly list questions that this panel might bring up as they make their presentations. And as I mentioned earlier, there is a set of questions that will be coming to you a few days after this conference, and I'd like for you to respond to them. But that means remembering the sessions that you heard and the comments and content that was presented. So anyway, so this is the first panel that will be part of that particular set of questions for after the conference. So it's my pleasure to be a part of this panel and to facilitate this panel. This is I think a very important one, and I think this is the first opportunity we've had to bring this group together. And they're a very important group on many important levels, because they make significant impacts in sort of regionally different parts of sort of this hemisphere, I guess I would say. And for ALDI, we affectionately call the programs, institutes, associations that are going to be presenting this morning, we call them our sisters. We call them the ALDI sisters. And that's because many of them looked at the ALDI model, looked at what we were doing, and began to replicate, which we were very happy and glad and supported those efforts when they started to do that. So that's why we call them sisters, even though they may not necessarily exactly look like ALDI, which is common even within your own family. Your brothers and sisters sometimes don't exactly look like you, but other times they do. They resemble you, on many levels. So small elements, large elements are in each of these institute centers and associations that are going to be presenting. Each of the small elements of ALDI are within them, and so we get to hear from them this morning. So I'm very excited to have them here. I do want to point out that because ALDI is hosting this session, I will not have a formal presentation on ALDI. There is a handout on your table. It's the blue sheet That has a little brief history of ALDI. It also has our last year's, it's called basically a report on ALDI. So if you want to know a little bit more about ALDI, you can look there. We also have a website and are on Facebook as well. And of course, many of you, if not all of you, are on our listserv. So at the end, I will, make some closing remarks and incorporate ALDI in that one. Also, I do want to, if we have time, I do want to call on some of our current ALDI participants and our former ALDI participants to offer their input about their experience within ALDI or any of the institutes that are represented here. So without further ado, let me go ahead and just give a rundown of our panelists, and we'll begin with their presentations. So these are the institutes that are going to be presenting this morning. So representing the Advocates for Indigenous California Language Survival, also known as ICOLS, will be Vincent Medina. So he'll start us off. Vincent is a member of the board of directors of ICOLS and from the Bay Area. So he'll start us off. The next organization is the Northwest Indigenous Language Institute, also known as ILI, I-L-I. The chief presenters for ILI are Yane Underreiner and our good friend and ALDI alum, Dr. Virginia Beaver. So they'll be presenting on NILI, N-I-L-I. Our third presenter will be our good friend, Dr. Mary Lynn from the University of Oklahoma, and she's going to be representing the Oklahoma Native Language Association, and she is with the Sam Noble Museum at the University of Oklahoma. And then our next, after Mary Lynn will be Jordan Lackler from the Canadian Indigenous Language and Literacy Institute, also known as CILDI, from the University of Alberta at Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And then after him will be our good friend and partner, Inez Slaughter, Executive Director of the Indigenous Language Institute, ILI, I-L-I, from Santa Fe, New Mexico. And then I will close off the session as representing ALDI for this morning's panel. So without further ado, let me go ahead and allow our panelists to begin their presentation. So Vincent Medina, would you like to start?
Hello, my name is Vince. I'm a member of the board of directors of the Advocates for Indigenous California Language Survival, or better known as ICOLS. And I thank you all for having me here, especially to Odom. Sorry if I'm getting your name wrong, but for having me on your lands. There's a lot to summarize in 10 minutes, so I'm sorry if this isn't as neat as I want it to be. But what I'm going to try to summarize is what my organization, what ICOLS does to benefit California Indian languages, revitalization and strengthening them, and also about my own personal experience revitalizing my own language, which is Chochenyo, the language of the eastern shores of San Francisco Bay. Quickly, this is a lot of information, but it summarizes a lot of what ICOLS does. ICOLS is an all Native board of directors from different regions of the state, from all the way north near the Oregon border to San Diego. We work primarily to help on different fronts. For those who have living language speakers, we work to team them up so that the languages won't be lost with master apprentice programs. For languages that have no living native speakers, We work with linguistic documentation and archives. We work with sound recordings. We work with different ways. And as was mentioned in the last lecture, studying documentation is just one part of it. We have to try to go around roadblocks and obstacles to make the languages living in 21st century languages that could be spoken in modern context, and that's our ultimate goal. There's several different IQLS programs. Language is Life is one of them, which is a conference every 2 years that focuses on California Indian people coming together to show successes, challenges. It's a series of workshops. We're actually having one which is in September of this year. So if anybody is interested in going, you're welcome to apply. At iqls.org, there's information about that. But this is primarily community building workshops to try to understand our successes and our challenges. The Master Apprentice Program is another program that we have that focuses on teaming up, like I mentioned earlier, people who have native speakers who want the languages to continue on. And I know for all of this is our goal, for our languages to continue and for the language to be continued on by the next generation. And the Master Apprentice Program, it works to form successful, meaningful ways to pass the language from one generation to another and make sure that the language continues to thrive. Seeds of Language is another program that we have where it's mini grants up to $500 where California Indians can apply for technology, for different ways to research their languages, to go to conferences, to go to workshops, for travel expenses. $500 is not a large amount, but for a lot of people, this can make somebody either go to a conference or not. And so the $500 does come in handy for a lot of different reasons. And I'll also talk about Breath of Life in just a moment. And Breath of Life is another key component to IQLS. But it also has to do with my own personal experience as being a member of the board of directors and something that I care very much about, and it's very connected to my own heart, my own struggle. This is a map of San Francisco Bay. If you look to the right side of San Francisco Bay, you're going to see the Chochenyo language group. Historically, there's 8 different Ohlone languages spoken from north of San Francisco all the way down to about Monterey, 120 miles down. Today, 3 of the languages are still spoken, including my own Chochenyo, after being revitalized. A brief history. Because of multiple waves of invasion, the Spanish coming in with the missions, the Mexican Rancho period, and the gold rush, and the American Manifest Destiny and all of that, the very last fluent speaker of Chochenyo passed away in the 1930s. But before he passed away, John Peabody Harrington documented hundreds of pages of notes, and before that, hundreds of pages of notes were also documented on different Ohlone languages. And through that, we're able to revitalize. In college, I wrote a paper before I started working with my language at all, because for a long time I wondered if it was even possible to relearn it, to reconnect with it, to reawaken it. And I wrote a paper before I started studying my language, before I started working on it, before I started trying to breathe life into it. And the very end of this paper I wrote, it ends with, our history is directly related to why we do not have a language spoken in current times with native speakers. But I feel that will change soon. There is no reason why our past should ever be forgotten, but there is no reason why we cannot progress while maintaining our cultural roots and moving forward despite injustices. So things have changed in the last 5 years dramatically. And Breath of Life is a key component to things changing, at least for my own personal experience. Breath of Life, it's a week-long conference, similar to the one that's happening right now in Washington, D.C., but on a local level, that aims to facilitate California Indian people with with few or no living speakers, native speakers left, through documentation to revitalize and relearn and reconnect with their languages. So, like many who are revitalizing languages, I started kind of with things like this, like very, very, very simple word lists that I had no idea how to even pronounce, to be honest, for a lot of these things, because I had no understanding of my language whatsoever growing up. I started to get these word lists, and I just started to look at them. And this is Ramatush, which is a very close related sister to Chochenyo. And when I started to look through these notes, I realized that, okay, maybe I can learn a word for deer, or for bird, or for the hills, or for the sky. But I started to wonder what comes next. What's going to come after I memorize these very simple words? How am I going to string sentences together? How am I going to start to have a conversation? How am I going to teach other people? And after that, I realized that there's a huge amount of data documentation that are in the archives at UC Berkeley on my own language, on Chochenyo. And after starting to work with the archives, I started to hit roadblocks, such as frustration of not knowing basic phrases. Like, for a long time, I couldn't find a word for the phrase thank you, or even goodbye. And I started to get frustrated, because I know that we had words for these, but because of the severe effects of colonization, a lot of these were either lost or they're not documented. So one way around that would be successful creation of phrases and of words, using what we know to exist and what to be true of our language. That's evolution. Not knowing how to form sentences, because for a long time, when I first started speaking, the first year or two, I felt like I was kind of speaking like a caveman, you know, like I eat, I do, and so I wanted to be as grammatically correct as possible. So working with a linguist at the Breath of Life program had really helped me begun to learn how our ancestors would say things, how our family members back then would put words together, how they would string sentences, how they would make something past tense or future tense, use possessive or second person or third person or whatever. And another big problem is lack of language material, because in Chochenyo, because we were so hit by multiple waves of invasion, because we're in a very urban area, a lot of our territory is paved over with concrete, I began to see that there was a lack, but there's ways around that also, because what we do have left in the Chochenyo notes, we can utilize that as much as we can, but also something else that we can do is we can borrow from neighboring Ohlone languages and change words to give them Chochenyo attributes. So if we don't have a word that's available, it's possible to borrow a word from a neighboring language that there is documentation of. And the pages for all Ohlone languages together number in the tens of thousands. So if we can't find a word in Chochenyo, it's hopeful to me to know that there is a way to work around that. These are some pictures from Breath of Life. That's me cheesing with my linguist. Well, we have a term, ICOs, we call them, because we didn't want to call them linguists, we wanted to call it something a little bit more friendly, so we call them our linguistic buddies. So that's Justin Spence, my linguistic buddy who works at the archives. So you're going to see the complexity of me learning how to tear apart words and put them back together. And this is working with our locative suffixes, because for a long time, one of my big things was I couldn't figure out, because one way that we end words that end in a vowel sound is we put tka. But so if I was to say I'm in Arizona, I would say ekrute Arizona tka. But if something ends in a consonant, like if I was going to go to Starbucks, I would say ekrute is Starbucks tak. So I couldn't often find out, like for me, and then working with the linguists to understand, okay, this is with a consonant sound, this is with a vowel sound, this is when to use tak, this is when to use the ka. So I started to work with putting the words back together in the correct way. So besides working with language, ICOLS is also we do a lot of cultural sharings, and this is us at Breath of Life going through the basketry, the Ohlone basketry archives that are at the Hearst Museum. This is one of my Ohlone friends, Rico, looking at the baskets our ancestors made. Programs can be fun. So this is something my friend made in the Ohlone language, Karina Luna. And instead of green eggs and ham, it's green acorns and salmon. And so it's a way to work with kids with language revitalization. And this is how large the group was last year in 2012. So we had a very good showing from different, over 60 different tribal groups in California were represented. And, 60 different languages in California were represented. So this is showing the diversity of all of that. One way that I carry the language on is by speaking to my little brother. I'm fortunate to have a little brother who's 10 years old. And so working in a home setting, because I don't have a large language program, I'm not teaching anybody else right now besides my little brother. And so working with him to speak the language in a modern context. And it was really exciting because he's actually getting it very quickly, because I'm sure a lot of you know how quick kids pick up language. And before I left to this conference, he said, "Can I go with you?" And I said, you can't. Like, it's, I'm sorry, but you have other things to do. You have a summer camp, and I'm only here for a few days. And he said, "But I speak Chochenyo too. Why can't I come?" And so it's nice to, like what what Daryl was mentioning with identity building. This is a part of his identity. And for me, realistically, I didn't grow up with somebody I could turn to and ask, how do I say this? How do I say that? But he has somebody he can turn to. And the other day, he was like yelling at me from the other room, and I was getting kind of annoyed. But he was asking me, how do I say this? How do I say that? And then I realized, I can't be annoyed with that, because he has somebody he can turn to ask, how do you say words? And to him, the language, it's not an issue of it being a language that had no speakers for a while. It's not an issue of having to deal with these huge obstacles, at least right now, because for him, the language, it's just there. It is. It's a part of life, and it's something that's connected to him, and he knows that, and it's part of his identity now. And this is something that I think we can all do to instill that next generation with pride. This, how am I on time? Do I have a couple minutes? Okay. This is something that one of my heroes, and also somebody who's on a lot of you might know, Leanne Hinton. She's a linguist at UC Berkeley who is a huge ally and a huge advocate for our community. And she's also a member of ICLES. And she wrote this poem that summarizes a lot of what many people who are revitalizing their languages experience. And it's at night when the work is done and the children are in bed and the roar of this freeway is quieted and the house cools and darkens into stillness. She holds in her hand the pages on which rest spidery symbols of sounds whispered by dying grandmothers and written down by a crazed linguist long dead too, of words spoken for the final time generations ago, entombed now in a perpetual silence of last sound waves decayed into carbon traces and a paper monument to the passing of a language from this earth. Called each night by a power beyond her understanding, she lifts a page in her circle of light and begins a ceremony of resurrection. The pencil scratchings that encase the grandmother's gift fall away, and the words reawaken. Her voice frees them one by one, and then they fly into the night, echoing in and out of corners. The air vibrates with their saying, the world resonates with their being. And I think this is something that many of us could identify with, whether we're a male or a woman. Because the fact is that language revitalization, speaking our languages, it's more than just documentation, like it was mentioned. It's more than just reading pages off a note, but there's something that's spiritual, that's guiding us, that's beyond, if our heart's there in the right place, that's beyond just simply studying words for the purpose of speaking words. But we're doing this, and we're doing the work, in my mind, of giants, of heroes, because we're doing something that a lot of people didn't think was possible, but we're showing people that it is possible, and we're doing it. We're living examples of that. When I was at Eichels at the first Breath of Life, I saw this phrase, and I'm a pretty stoic guy. But when I saw this phrase, I actually had to walk out of the room because I had tears coming down my eyes. And as I hear their voices, their faces, I cannot see. They have so much to say, and they want to talk to me. And this quote, this saying, it's something that shows that we're doing this for more than ourselves, but we're doing this for our ancestors, our family members of the past, but we're also doing this for our next generation. And it's a loop. It's a continuation of all of the work that our ancestors went through to make sure, the suffering that they went through, to make sure that the languages would be spoken. Because it would be easier back then to assimilate, to just speak Spanish or English or whatever. But they intentionally, for a reason, continued their language on. They continued speaking their languages, even through the biggest challenges that could be faced by human beings. And their work, it wasn't in vain. And we're all living testament. We're all proof of that their work, it wasn't in vain, that they were doing it for the right reason, and they succeeded, they won. And to me, when I see this picture of my family, this is a lot of what I'm doing it for. You see different generations there. This was at our last camp out that we had last year. And you see the elders, and you see my father's generation, and you see me and my cousin. And like what was mentioned earlier, and this is intergenerational. This is going beyond just one generation, and that speaks to the strength and the perseverance of those before us. And as I end, I wanted to end with a few words in Chochenyo before I pass on the mic, because I'm going on for a little bit longer. But a few words, they came to me that I wrote down a while ago, and it's Hementuhi haya ayena tuhi akwe arukush. So every day we fight, and today is no different. Makin makhaya maknanokma. We fight for our languages. Makin makhaya makmuekma. We fight, we struggle for our people. Makin makhaya ta okwe makish. We struggle, we fight to make things right. Hementuhi, every day, ayena tuhi akwe arukush. And today isn't any different. Aya hementuhi makin makata. But every day we keep going, we tread on. Makin makricha maknonokma. We speak our languages. Makin mak okwe makmuekma. We cure our people. Aye hushish tamakis orshe. And tomorrow will be better because of it. Thank you.
Slahayam Tilakam, Slush Chisan, Slahayam Pus Ugu Tilakam, Pus Ul Tilakam, Pus Mithlite, Kaba Ilai, Kaba Yakwa. Good morning, thank you. And thanks to the people of this earth and your ancestors and your people. I'm going to talk a few minutes today about the Northwest Indian Language Institute. My name is Jana Underreiner. I direct the Institute. I think more aptly put, I take directions from those of us at the Institute of what they want to do. I come representing many voices, and forgive me for forgetting anyone today. Lots of us would like to have been here today, and Virginia and I are representing us. I'll include Roger here. Virginia Beavert, our elder, Yakima elder, Yakima Ichishkeen speaker, Ichishkeen, all dialects of Ichishkeen, I would say. Virginia, first language, Ichishkeen, learned English when you went to school. It's a blessing to have Virginia with us at the Institute. And Virginia has asked me to speak for both of us, so I'll do my best. My ancestors are not from here. My ancestors are from Sweden. I am second generation. I was raised in Illinois and Chicago and particularly, and have lived in Oregon now for about 34 years, which is where I met Virginia. Before I start, I'd like to give thanks and pay tribute to Aldi. I know that we wouldn't exist without Aldi. You empowered many of our speakers in Oregon and Washington for them to come to the University of Oregon in 1997 and said to us, we learned a lot at Aldi, we need something here, you've been in our communities, our language situation is so different, please, you need to do this for us. And so the tribes of Oregon and Washington and Northern California started the Northwest Indian Language Institute in 1997. I want to just give an idea. Oregon originally, historically, had over 25 languages. Many are sleeping. We've lost 4 first speakers in the last year and a half. It's the individuals that are working to reclaim, revitalize, to hear their languages spoken again are busy at work and heroes in my mind. Here's what our map looks like. The whole Northwest, this is a duplicate of the state of Washington, and multiply this by 3.5 and you have the state of California. Many languages. Languages that are under revitalization and reclamation at the Institute are Ichishkin from Yakima, Warm Springs, and Umatilla, Kitch, which is a Chinookan language that's spoken in the middle part of the Columbia River, which divides Washington from Oregon, Northern Paiute, which is eastern in Oregon, Cayuse Nez Perce from the Umatilla Reservation, which is in the northern corner of Oregon and where Virginia was born 91 plus years ago. Siletz, Dene, and Tolowa are sister languages from Southern California up through the middle coastal area of Oregon, represented as the coastal Athabascan languages. Chinook Wawa is the language often called language of trade. It was the language that came from Chinookans in Salish language, French, and English, and is the language of revitalization at Grand Ronde. Takelma, which is a language that we have not heard spoken since the 50s, is under revitalization, and that language is spoken just south of Eugene, the center of the western part of the state. And Lushootseed and Wiyot. Lushootseed is a language from Washington, Wiyot is a language from Northern California, and those are being revitalized by individuals from Washington and from your area, Vincent. Let me give tribute to Warm Springs. It was the Warm Springs folks that had been here to Aldi and came to us in '97 with others, folks from Washington and other tribes in Oregon, and asked us. We began our first institute in 1998, and our 15th one is starting today. We started as a 3-week institute. We're 2 weeks now. Folks just can't leave home for that long. Fishing happens during that time, berries are picked, lots of food harvest. So we've tailored our program for 2 weeks, and then that's followed by a 1-week intensive. We, the University of Oregon, the Northwest Indian Language Institute, rests at the bend of the Willamette River, and that's a picture of the river. Our goals are to strengthen Native teaching, empower and strengthen teachers through teacher training, to help and assist develop curriculum and assessments, preserve Northwest languages through documentation, and support Native students at the university. So I've organized the PowerPoint to address the Native Revitalization Act, so I'll talk first about Native teacher certification, Native languages as a medium of instruction in our regionally wide, and the languages that are taught in the school system, and then some of the pedagogical trends that are happening. Please don't try to read this PowerPoint. If anybody's interested in it, I'm happy to send it to you. Really what I want this to be is a guide through our conversation here, or my talk here, and then to bring you pictures. This is really to bring to life the people that are doing this work. We have teacher certification bills in Oregon, Washington, and California. In Oregon, we have 7 Chinook/Wawa teachers that are certified from the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, 6 at Warm Springs, 4 that are undergoing certification in the Umatilla Indian Reservation, 4 that are undergoing certification in Smith River, that's the Tolowa language, and Roger Jacob told me this morning that his papers are in for his teacher certification on the Yakima Nation. He's an Ichishkin language teacher and student of Virginia Beaver. Here's some of our teachers. This is Neely Summer Institute through the years, but these are our teachers that are on the ground learning and teaching every day. Okay, and what just happened here? There we go. This is our conference room, or more known really as our living room here at Neely, where we have dinners during the Institute. This is a high school teacher and a student of Virginia on the Yakima Nation at Eagle and Toppenish High School. Here's a high school teacher and middle school teacher from Suquamish in Washington. Here's a family that's teaching language in their home. Piowa on the, would be your left, is a Tolowa language teacher at the University of Oregon. His wife is teaching his homeschooling the children, and will be heading up Neely's early childhood education program next year. Warm Springs has started an immersion program this year. There's 10 students in it. Umatilla Ichishkin has 10 students. The Yakima Ichishkin Immersion Preschool began last year. I'm not sure how many students Greg has. Do you know, Roger? Here's a picture of Warm Springs. There's students, Virginia, and a few of the students in the back are actually U of O Ichishkin students that go out to the different areas where the language is spoken and work with folks there. Languages as medium of instruction in schools. Here we have the Chinook/Wawa preschool. This preschool started in 1999 with A&A funding. There is a K-1 immersion after school. It's difficult to get the program in the Willamina School District, which is where it was originally going to be. There is now the kindergarten and first grade. The woman on your left was originally a kindergarten teacher. She's now the head of the language program and the teacher of the youth in Willamina High School. So now there's a high school program that works with Lane Community College, which is in the Eugene area, and her first and second year high school program has university credit through a program that's called College Now. So her students that graduate from the second year can enter the university, actually any school system, with college credit. So they've met their college requirement. This is a preschool teacher here, and if my video works, we'll get to see the preschool kids. Actually, this is the kindergarten kids.
Morgan Box Dofflon, Iikson, Hector Mahmoud Michaela. Box Dofflon, Iktamoon Michaela.
The teacher here was a student of Chinook/Wawa since she was 12 years old. The technology that they're using is this smart board, which we're all trying to figure out how to learn. And that's their good morning song and calendar song.
Can I switch the car? Wait.
So we'll move on to looking at programs now that are in middle schools and high schools. The Yakima Ichishkin is taught at the Wapato Middle School and High School. Roger told me today he had 31 students this year. At Umatilla, Cayuse, Nez Perce, Umatilla, and Walla Walla is taught in their Nihiawe community, which is a high school. The Siletz Dene is taught in the Siletz Valley Charter School. Tolowa Dene is taught at Del Norte High School and has been since the late 80s. Lauren Baumlin has been teaching Tolowa language there for many years. And Chinookwah is taught in K through 1 and also at Wawalina High School. In community colleges, Ichishkin is taught at Blue Mountain, Pendleton, Oregon, on and off for many years, has been there. Chinookwah at Lane Community College has 2 years since 2006, and I'm one of the instructors for that program and realized that this was a good opportunity to figure out how many students have graduated. So since 06, 53 students have gone through the program. Let's see here. Let's go back up here for a minute. So at the University of Oregon with Virginia Beavert, I need to say this, since 2008 is when Virginia came. Neely started in 1997. We were really a linguistic program. We were in the linguistics department. We were training students to be linguists, to work with communities. Many of us were working in the communities, documenting languages, developing curriculum. Virginia was one of the co-founders of the Northwest Indian Language Institute and taught our Ichishkin language class during the summer, and decided in 2008, after receiving her master's degree here in bilingual education, that Virginia wanted to continue her education and complete her PhD. So she came to the U of O in 2008 to do that. During that time, she co-authored the Ichishkin Dictionary, the Ichishkin grammar, and her dissertation focuses the traditions of her culture that are no longer being practiced. With Virginia coming came many of her students and others. And since 2008, we now have 14 Native American students at the University of Oregon because of Virginia, because of Neely, that are there studying linguistics, studying anthropology. There's a teacher training program, a master's program, subsequent law, and I have to give thanks to Virginia and Roger. He and Virginia came together in 2008. So within the OUS, the Oregon University School System, we have a policy now. So since '96, if you showed proficiency in your language and could be evaluated by one of the elders of your community, the language would be accepted. So now there's a more formal policy since 2011 within all Oregon University System schools, and by showing comparable proficiency in a language. So since then, students that speak Tolowa, Chinookwah, Wiyot, Lushootseed, Ichishkin, Nez Perce, Lakota, Choctaw, Northern Paiute, Shoshone, Blackfeet have met their language requirement. And in addition, high school students that have taken their language in the high school who can show proficiency in their native language meet the entrance requirement to the University of Oregon and all OUS schools. And the U of O requirement is 3 years of a world language. The languages that are taught at the University of Oregon, 2 years of Ichishkin. We have a community that's taught through distance ed community program of Lushootseed and also the Tolowa language. Because of Virginia coming, Neely has taken more of a mentoring role now in mentoring Native graduates, undergraduate students, and I would just like to pay tribute to them. We have 2 Ichishkin graduate students, Lushootseed graduate student, and a graduate student from Wiyot tribe. And here's some pictures. Virginia's graduation. I didn't tell you that was going to be in there, Virginia. And Roger and Greg. Roger went through the master's program in language teaching, and Greg is on leave back at the reservation. Started the immersion program in Ichishkin last year, and is concurrently a PhD student at the U of O. This was Virginia's Defense Day. There's Greg with his son at Neely. Marty Atkins graduated with her master's in language teaching. We have a language teaching master's with you can specialize in your native language. Marty is now in a PhD program in anthropology. Pio Baumlin did the same thing, and he's in a PhD program in linguistics, working on a description of the Tawa language. And Zeke is doing the same in Lashutseed. Just some more students, Roger. And I want to pay tribute to Lauren Baumlin, who I had the privilege of working with in 1995, 6 and 7, was the second Native graduate student to graduate from the University of Oregon with his master's in a description of Tawa. And we have undergraduate students that direct us more than our graduate students, don't they? Okay, I'd like to look at some of the pedagogical trends. Daryl talked a lot about place-based. We're true believers in place-based education. This is what we really assist the tribes in writing and have done since 1996 for me. I could go on about it forever. I just wanted to show a sample of the unit, and why it's so important is because it's place-based. It takes elements, natural resources from the area, and kids learn about this, and this is a weaving unit. Here we're learning what sticks to use, the straight ones, not the crooked ones. There's Evan in that picture. Here's the gathering of sticks and a showing of, and kids learn this. They learn to identify the plant from all year round. They learn about the community members that do this and basket weavers in their community, how to harvest and prepare, what the sticks look like before they start weaving, how it's done, what the process is done. They look at baskets that are in the collection at the tribe. They learn about the early basket tree people of the community, so history of the community. This project allowed an elder in the community to actually write storybooks, and she hadn't illustrated anything since middle school. This is a woman that's 72 years old. Her illustrations are so precious. So it's a way to have the community involved to be linked to natural resources and people of the community. Other materials that are developed at Neely, everything from drawings and talking cards to teach grammar, felt boards, still use felt boards, to the kids generate this. They make this happen. This is a comic life program, Go Animate, and thank you. And Zeke is big on YouTube, so if you're interested in any of Zeke Zahir's work on Lashutseed, and this is bringing language in the home, go to YouTube and look at Lashutseed. The distance learning class of Virginia Ichishkin places us in the community. Our students have been allowed to go up into the different communities to meet tribal members with Virginia, the programs that are happening there, and it allows us to bring in documentation work that we're doing and repurpose documentation materials. So this is a short clip of Virginia. This one focuses on cooking, so we're looking at different verb structures for the type of... So we know that as we gather linguistic data, we need to repurpose it for learning. That's available in many different ways. we've lost the...
Echo.
There we go. So I'm going to wrap it up because I've gotten my...
Rồi cha em chị yêu bắp chuột.
One of the things that I wanted to talk about, Daryl talked a lot about youth, is that we have a youth program this summer, and the youth being more involved, not only in language learning, but being mentors. So we found that as we link youth with younger learners, so in particular high school kids working with elementary kids as language mentors, building them as leaders, and hopefully targeting them to be language teachers. As you saw the woman that was teaching the Chinook-Walla language class, this is exactly what happened to her in high school. And so we need to build teachers, and we're finding that this is a successful way to do it. Okay. Thank you.
Hello. Sanlai Kayasodan. It's Yuchi for thank you. It's not really quite thank you. It's more, it's actually closer to, it's very good what you are doing. So I think it's appropriate here for all of you. And I want to thank Aldi and the Tohono O'odham Nation and people for inviting me here as well. And for the OMA board, who has allowed me to represent them today in talking about the organization. I was a founding member and part of the the teaching team for years, but I'm not currently on the board, so I'm representing them today on this. There's just so many great organizations here. I feel always, we have a large state and a lot of tribes. I always feel small compared to everything that other people are doing. Just a real quick overview. We've really changed over the years. And so there's really three different parts of this about Onaldi, when we were called Onaldi originally, and then when it became ONLAW. And then the current ONLAW has changed focus a little bit. So there's really three different parts of our history. And a little bit of background for Oklahoma. Daryl gave a little bit of this in that, and I don't think it's not really very good focus for you guys way in the back, but up in the corner in the purple area is the Miamia and some other Algonquin tribes up there. But the history of Oklahoma is one of forced removal for many of the Great Lakes, Midwest area, and also the southeastern tribes, and then reservation of some of the Plains tribes that were already there or forced from further north as well. So there's 11 different language families in Oklahoma. This one is a little bit misleading because this actually has 3 families in it, and Comanche, Kiowa, and Apache, so 3 different language families in there as well. But this shows the traditional assigned lands, or what are now the jurisdictions, as Daryl talked about, and where people are today, actually, as well. Notice I made Yuchi very big on the map so people can see it. Yeah. Oklahoma had common needs, even though it was very diverse, not just languages, the traditions that people came from, their types of lifeways, their celebrations, what time of the year they celebrate, different things, is very diverse. But they did have some common needs. One of them was teachers and teacher trainings. This is still a big problem today, I think, for everybody. But early in the 1990s, one of the things that was noted was that we really needed to have some teacher training. There was a lot of people wanting to teach as speakers who were doing community language classes, but they felt that they weren't making any headways, and they wanted some information about how to teach more effectively. There really wasn't in the 1990s any skills and curriculum out there, or any curriculum for making language for native languages in Oklahoma. Specific knowledge about how people acquire language, especially all throughout the United States, where we're predominantly a monolingual society. People don't really understand what it means to the stages in learning a second language, or what happens when children acquire a language. A lot of times when children started acquiring an Indian language, the school teachers would tell them that they couldn't speak English that way, and so talk to the parents, and this was even in the 1990s, about making them quit speaking their languages. So we needed information out there about bilingual acquisition as well. Ways to assess students in programs, and then also language resources. There are still very few resources for most of the languages in Oklahoma, and then translating these for new literature for kids learning the languages as well. So those were the common needs. The first iteration was actually the Oklahoma Native American Language Development Institute, and it was written by a grant from Akira Yamamoto, who was one of the founding founders and founding teachers of ALDI, with Lucille Watahamaji and others, and with Carl Downing from the Universal Central Oklahoma Admin. He's a member of the Cherokee Nation. And this pattern pretty much like ALDI, in that it was intensive all day, Monday through Friday for 1 month in June, over 3 summers. We all lived in dorms, and we met at the Kickapoo Preschool in Hera, Oklahoma, which was a really friendly space. The staff, the preschool staff, since it wasn't in session in the summer, helped us out, and that was also one of the founding ideas later for OWN Law, was that the learning take place in very friendly places for us. Again, on the ALDI model, you could get undergraduate or graduate credit from UCO. You could get a total of 24 credits over the 3-year periods, or 8 per year. And it was progressive over a 3-year course. If you started, we wanted you to finish. We had a few people that might start the 2nd year, but we didn't allow anybody new to start the 3rd year, because we were building on what we had learned from the 1st year. Let's see. And then we had some individual seminars that took place besides the courses, the Linguistics for Native American Communities, the Bilingual Language Arts Curriculum, and Acquisition and Development. And then we had these seminars that were on it. So those were more specialized workshops throughout the month. Where's my picture? I might have put the wrong one down on here. Can you get my purse for me? It might be in that bag. That's in the other bag. Depends on if you guys really want photographs or not. Let's see. Thank you. Photographs. Well, this should show a picture of people working together, very much like Jana's. But one of the things that I think that mentoring has been a part of ALDI forever, and it certainly was for early on in ONALDI, in that Akira and Carl Downing really felt strongly that we would work in language groups, and that each language group would have a linguistic buddy or a mentor. And some of the groups had people like me. I wasn't a linguist when I started in with ONALDI on the 1st year. I was teaching English as a second language, and Akira asked me to come and help with materials development. And so there were a couple of us material development people around to kind of get ideas for making teaching materials in the classroom. But these kinds of mentorings have actually really changed people's lives and have really changed the shape of language revitalization in many other cultures. One of those is a relationship between Margaret Malden, a Muskogee Creek speaker, and Jack Martin. And they met each other at Onaldi in 1991, and they have since done the Dictionary of Muskogee Creek and a grammar and a collection of tales together as well. So we basically, everything that we learned about the linguistics and curriculum, we immediately applied to materials development. So at the end of the summer, each summer, people came home with books to go into the classrooms, poems, a lot of different grammar games, alphabet books, just pattern books were a really big hit, but pretty much anything. This was a little pre-media, so we didn't do as much with recordings and video as certainly ONLAW does today. Let's see, there's one. Okay. Okay. Okay, so here it is. There's the pictures. This is Jack and Margaret on the side here, with the rest of the Muskogee Creek team. Okay, so Onaldi really filled a void. There was nothing else like this in Oklahoma at the time. It really filled a need in networking people together. One of the first things that happened the first year, the first week, was that people just talked about how isolated they were, how at that time, how they didn't feel that the kids were interested in learning the languages at all. A lot of them felt real despair that they were working really hard to try to teach their languages and no one would come to their classes. It was a very different feeling than 20 years, today, what the feeling is today, when we can't keep up with the youth demand for teachers. It was very different. As a young person at the time, I was kind of shocked. I get in there and I thought, well, we're going to start learning the languages, we're going to start creating these materials. And literally the first week was people crying about the state of the language and the attitude that people had towards the languages in the communities. So I think one of the primary things that Onaldi and ONLAW since has taken up is really helping network people together, and that people aren't alone, but also sharing good ideas that are taking place. And we'll get back to that at the end of the talk. So it also responded to the Oklahoma Department of Education's inclusion of Native American languages to fulfill the world languages requirement. And in fact, Oklahoma changed the wording from foreign language to world language after NALA in 1990, and immediately started allowing the languages to be taught in the public schools. However, there weren't people to teach these languages in the public schools. There wasn't curriculum, there weren't materials, and so even if it was allowed, a school system and a principal may have been they were very hesitant to include a language in their school. So it also, we did a lot with learning about how to write ANA grants for funding, since those were very new at the time as well, especially the third year. Onaldi trained teachers who are still teaching today. Some of the teachers in the public schools, some of the teachers in communities got their start in Aldi. And so there's definitely a continuation there. It inspired teachers to use communicative methods. There was a lot of grammar translation that was being done before, and we still find that. It's still a kind of a comfort thing that people go back to, because that was probably how they learned a second language in school, in a school setting. But for the most part, people have really embraced the idea of immersion and teaching for purposes, so learning a traditional skill or being able to do something they want to do in the language. It provided training for young linguists to work collaboratively. I certainly got my training as a linguist there, and that's how I shifted from teaching English to never teaching English again. And also a community of language advocates and teachers in Oklahoma. that still continues today. After the 3-year grant was over, Kira really couldn't find somebody to pick it up, to base it in Oklahoma. And Dr. Downing had retired. In fact, he had been long retired at the time. And so it ceased to be. And a Yuchi man named Greg Bigler, who was co-teaching Yuchi in his community with an elder, Maggie Marcy, decided he would talk to Akira himself and see if there was anything else that we could do. And so Greg started a grassroots organization called the Oklahoma Native Language Association. It does have a constitution and bylaws, since Greg is a lawyer, he made sure of that. But the focus really changed in that people were having a hard time, just like Yana said, coming for a whole month in the summertime. In addition, we have a hard time, and we thought about moving it from June to another time, but because there were so many different languages, so many different cultures in Oklahoma, no matter where we moved it would basically keep some group or more than one group from participating. And we talked about doing it in smaller bits, but the idea actually formed to have it something that's movable, that we could do training in smaller chunks, weekend workshops, maybe 3-day workshops, sometimes a week workshop, and move it around the state and have it more tailored to that specific area at certain times that people could meet. And so that was a really different innovation, I think, that Oklahoma strategized to fulfill the needs of the people. So, and also continuing the idea to be accessible and comfortable for elders and traditional people. The Ikwai Kickapoo Preschool was a nice setting for the classes, but the dorms were really horrible. And in fact, some of the elders even got physically sick, and had to go home because the dorms, even we tried to find different dorms at different colleges, and none of them were very comfortable for people. So we wanted these places to be places that we could have control over the food and comfort. So. Here are the Omaha Declaration of Purpose. Pretty straightforward, to preserve, promote, and enhance. Probably some of the wording would be changed today. This was more of the wording in 1994. To promote and encourage activities for young and the elderly that are the past and future of Native languages. To work and encourage others to address the needs of the Native languages. So, in other words, in educating the greater public, because if we really want and really are working towards full bilingualism in communities, we have to prepare Oklahoma non-Native people for this as well, because there's a lot of resistance. To recognize those who have shown great commitment. For a long time, Omaha had an elder award, and that's what that is, to discuss techniques and technology for learning and teaching Native languages. Again, this was 1994 when this was written, so technology was just coming in. And not just Oklahoma, Omaha actually serves a larger area, so people from Omaha have come down, Prairie Band Potawatomis from Kansas came down a lot, Mississippi Band Choctaw would come over quite a few times. So people around that area would come to Omaha. So there's different types of annual events that we held. The annual meeting was always the second weekend of October. We always included a guest speaker. Our guest speaker would come, we tried to trade off. We tried to focus on people from Oklahoma and then people from outside of Oklahoma that could reinvigorate us with new ideas. It always included teacher sharing, so teacher tips, what was working in my classroom, this kind of thing, and then a workshop with materials development. And that was generally taught by Akira and some of his students, later kind of became known as the teaching team thing. And then an NSU symposium workshop in April. Then we had the movable events, workshop requests. We did one for the Sauk language program before it was the current Sauk language program. We did one in Cheyenne country. We did them around in that way. And then we also had the Ford Foundation seminar grants where we that moved around the state, and students could get 6 hours of credit. And that grant was run through Kira and through the Indigenous Language Institute. Okay. So let me, I don't know why these aren't, here we go. There they are. So here's Jenny DeGroat, who's in the audience. And I think this is when we broke her in for you guys at Aldi. Doing a workshop for us. And people laughing, of course. She's always fun. Just shows the Mississippi and band Choctaw doing a puppet show that they did. This is a Yuchi elder giving a little lesson on her language. This is an early technology workshop. There's one of the few pictures of Akira that he allowed to be taken of him. And Geneva Navarro photographing him. And then them, or videotaping and them looking at the videotape afterwards. The teaching team, this is Tracy Harada Eds, who was again a student of Akira's and has been working with the Cherokee for many years. And this shows you kind of the place of feeling. The annual conference always used to be out at Indian United Methodist Conference Place. Very, we had Indian cooks, and it was really comfortable. The camp houses we could stay in, sleep in, so it was free for everybody as well. Okay. Still, we do the Meeverville Feast type of thing to try to accommodate different schedules. And this is the Ford Foundation teaching demonstrations there. Okay. The Onla board today, this shows you a picture of them, kind of generations going down. The woman on the end, Condessa Teehee, is now my graduate student. And I'd like to brag on a couple other, well, two of them are. Josh Henson is too. Leroy Seeley, the president, teaches at OU. And the older man behind them is actually a graduate from the Second Breath of Life workshop. And so, again, connecting people. He had never been connected to the other language doings in the state before going to our Breath of Life. And so now he's a member of the Onla board. One of the main things that Onla is doing today is part of, the bottom one is part of the CELO, the Consortium of Indian Language Organization. Condessa teaches through CELO, for language immersion for that. They've created a website, and they're trying to grow the membership as well. Okay. They still do the annual workshops at NSU, more technology-based, but again, whatever people want. So Colleen Fitzgerald, who's in the audience as well, the last year there was a definite need for learning more about immersion, and so we did an immersion workshop, and she headed that up as well. So. And I'd just like to thank you. This is another picture of Geneva doing her homework one night. Thank you.
Allah sis tlangwadlawan ay sehlu at tlangwadlawan antlagen yak amtanga hinadikyam. Greetings to everybody. Thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me all the way down from Canada. Very much enjoying your weather here. My name is Jordan Latchler. I am currently the director of SILDI. We have, I think, the longest name of any of the institutes. So we're the Canadian Indigenous Languages and Literacy Development Institute, but we just go by SILDI. We are probably, I think we are the youngest sister or brother of Aldi. We started in 2000. So we are just now turning 14. So we're still a young, energetic teenager, but we still have lots to learn, I think. Our founding members, some of our founding members came directly here from Arizona and from Aldi. So Dr. Heather Blair from the Faculty of Education has strong ties here in Arizona. Dr. Sally Rice from the Department of Linguistics, as well as Donna Paskman, who is a Cree language teacher. They were all instrumental in founding Sildi in those early years around 2000. In our area, in Alberta, so if you were to look just straight north from here, you would reach Alberta. We're just on the east side of the Rocky Mountains. And in our region, it's been interesting. I love listening to these presentations, and I'm so glad that I've come after the three of you, because so much of what you've said is so similar, but so much of it is really different. So in our area, we are blessed because we have so many speakers. We have Cree speakers, we have Blackfoot speakers, we have Stoney speakers, we have Ojibwe speakers, we have Inuvialutun speakers. So many of the languages in Canada, on the prairies and in the north, are so vibrant and so strong and still have very large numbers of speakers, and even communities where most of the children are still learning and speaking the language. It's not universal, but the numbers are still very, very strong. Nonetheless, so many of the same issues that we've heard addressed here come up again and again. And that was where this idea for Sildi came, is that we knew that without effort at this point, even with so many speakers still around, without effort, we could see what the future would be. We know the direction that the languages were headed, even if these languages still had an extra 20, 30, 40, 50 years ahead of what many other languages were now experiencing. So although our context is very different, and certainly being on the Canadian side of the border, our legal situation is very different, the legislation that applies in Canada is very different, the funding model in Canada is very different, but the issues at the heart are the same. So we originally started back in 2000 with one single class in the summer. It was an introductory Cree language class. So it really started with the language, really started as a language instruction course. And it originally began, it was a joint venture between the University of Saskatchewan and the University of Alberta, with some support from Blue Quills, which is a tribal college. And for the first couple of years, it was just this very small gathering of folks doing this one Cree language class in the summer. But by 2003, the idea had caught on. We were following what had been happening at Aldi, and we saw the direction that we wanted to go in. And so by 2003, we found a permanent home in Edmonton on the campus of the University of Alberta, and we've been there ever since. And we'll be starting our 14th summer school 3 weeks from today, on July 8th. So for those of you who are particularly the participants here at Aldi, you would be very much at home at Sildi. Our format is in many ways quite similar. We do about 8 to 10 courses each summer, depending on enrollment. Each of our courses is university accredited, so you earn 3 university credits per class. And students take 2 courses during the summer. So it's an intensive 3-week institute. The classes run from 9 in the morning to 3:30 in the afternoon, so you get about 6.5 days in each class, about 36 total hours. And we have a special arrangement with the university that all of our students, if they're not already university students, come through what's called open studies, and that allows us to run at a university, but to allow people into our program who might not otherwise qualify for whatever reasons as full-time regular university students. So that's allowed us a lot of flexibility to admit folks who, say, didn't have a high school degree, or who were too old by the time high schools came to where they were living. So many of our students who were fluent students came to Sildi as their first time at a university, and really, in many cases, their first time even in any sort of higher education beyond, say, grade 6 or grade 7. But by going through open studies, we were allowed to bring them into the university and for them to earn credit just like any other student would. At Sildi, as it's developed over the years, we've really have sort of 2 sides, the 2 sides to Sildi. So one side is the linguistic side, and one side is the education side. And we really feel that the 2 sides complement each other. It's not a competition. It's not that one side is better, but that ideally students will have a full picture and a full set of skills if they can go through all of the linguistics courses and all of the education courses. Now myself, I come from the sort of linguistics side of things. That's where my training is in, and that's where I started when I first came to Sildy in 2003. So what we see here, these are the 6 linguistics courses that we offer each year, starting with an introductory linguistics course, a course on phonetics, which is taught by Ben Tucker, who many of you who've been at Aldi for many years would remember him now that he's up in Alberta with us. We have a course on morphosyntax, so word building, and a course on syntax and discourse. That's one that I teach. We have a course on language policy and planning, so it's basically our language activism class, and that is another one of our Aldi connections. And we have Susan Penfield has taught that course for us several times, and Susan is out there in the audience somewhere. And then we have our language documentation class, and that is sort of our tech class. That's how do you make good recordings of an elder? How do you set up your video camera so that the lighting is good? And how do you document? How do you archive? How do you use metadata? All that sort of tech work comes in our final language documentation class. So over the years, we've sort of settled on these 6 courses on the linguistic side as being the core elements that we feel that are especially beneficial. That if people go through this training, they come in either as speakers of their languages or as learners of their language. And if they go through all of those, they come out with a good, solid basis in linguistics. So here we see an example. This is Bruce Starlight from the Tsuut'ina Nation in Alberta. And so this is an example of a story he did where he recorded himself telling this story and videotaped it, and then it's sort of hard to see down here at the bottom, but he transcribed it into his language, gave an English translation, and you can, it's basically a full documentation of the story. So this is the kind of work that the students are able to do. On the education side, we have a whole other set of courses. So again, we start with an introduction to language and literacy. We really do focus in trying to incorporate as much traditional knowledge as possible into the language training. So our second education course there is language and culture using traditional knowledge and practices. We have a second language acquisition course on immersion teaching that our students take. We have another course on classroom materials development and curriculum development, another course on language assessment for immersion classrooms. And the last 2 down here, which have the 496 number, these are new courses that we've been developing the last couple of years. So one is using literacy and drama in the classroom, so puppet shows. I think, Mary, you just had excellent pictures with puppets. So using storytelling and drama as a way of language teaching. And then language through traditional cultural arts, so sewing and basket making and other sorts of traditional cultural arts as a way to get into language instruction. And then we continue to develop new courses. So some of them are language-specific courses. So we have Introduction to Cree. Last year we taught our first Introduction to Michif course. That went very well. We were excited to do that. Myself, I've done the last couple of years, developed a couple of new courses as we've been seeing technology coming in more and more. So this year we're doing an online tools for language revitalization course. And 2 years ago, we did a designing community dictionaries course. So being able to take the skills that the students develop through those basic linguistics and education courses and then apply them in particular ways in terms of developing dictionaries or more of these online tools. One thing that we are very proud of at Sildy, and one thing I think that's been really instrumental for our success, is the Community Linguist Certificate. So in 2007, we got this certificate approved. It's for those 6 linguistics courses that were there on the earlier screen. And for students who take those 6 courses, they'll receive what we call the Community Linguist Certificate, and it's a provincially recognized certificate. So it's not just something that we at SILDI give you, so it goes way beyond just us recognizing what the students have learned, but in fact it's approved by the university and by the province. And aside from being, I think, appropriate to recognize people for the work that they've done, this has been really beneficial for students who've received this. We are now up to almost 60 students who've earned this. And people are able to take this back to their home communities, not just as documentation of what they've been doing with their summers, but also to go to their school districts and say, hey, I deserve a raise. Look, I now have a Community Linguist Certificate, right? I have gone and gotten this training. I am now a better teacher, a more valuable employee than I was before. And so we've been very happy that people have been able to earn this certificate and then take it back into their home communities and use it for good. So here you see from 2 years ago our CLC cohort. Very happy smiley faces. We see, and it's a good representation. So 4 of the ladies there are from the Northwest Territories. 2 of the ladies are from Alberta. One is from Saskatchewan, and the very handsome gentleman in the back row is from Quebec. So we have a broad range of First Nations people from across Canada. And there you see our graduate numbers by year with through the CLC. So we started in 2000. It was approved in 2007, so we awarded our first ones in 2008. Then 9, 10, 11, and 12. We'll have 6 or 7 more this summer, and that'll put us up to about 60 people who have earned that certificate. I want to talk just briefly in the last couple of minutes about some of the challenges and opportunities that I think that we have at SILDI and that maybe apply more broadly to all of the institutes that we've seen up here. One is a challenge of year-round engagement and support. So our students come to SILDI, we work them really, really hard for 3 weeks. It's exciting, it's exhilarating, and then at the end it's sort of like, well, we'll see you in 49 weeks, take care. Don't forget anything, right? And so we are looking for ways, because we're very small. We're basically, as far as staffing goes, it's myself. So we have sort of limited resources in terms of what we're able to do with year-round engagement and support. But we realize it's an important element of what it is that we're trying to do. So we're finding new ways to try to encourage that, certainly with new technology and social media. Things are getting easier to keep track of people and for them to stay in touch with us. One thing that I've taken on myself as something I think is really important, recruitment of male speakers. So if you go back to that picture that we had of our CLC graduates, you see we have 7 women and 1 man. Well, and that's typical. You come to a class at SILDI, you'll see about 7 women, 1 man. Another 7 women, another 1 man. That's about the percentages that we have. And to me, just looking at the numbers, that means we're missing half of the population, right? And there's good reasons for that, and I think we all understand sort of why that is the way it is. But there are many really talented men out there who have tremendous amount of knowledge about their language and their culture and who either are or could be really great teachers, but we're just not reaching them. And so that's something that we're trying to improve upon. Another thing we're trying to do is because we have so many fluent speakers, right? When SILDI began, you just took it for granted that everybody in the classroom was a fluent speaker of their language. And that has stayed true throughout most of our time. But nowadays we are starting to see more non-fluent students come to SILDI. And we know that is to be expected. It's not in any way a surprise. But we also realize that fluent speakers and non-fluent speakers have different needs, right? What it means to be a community linguist when you're a fluent speaker of your language and you're literate in your language and you use your language every day might be a different thing than if you are still a learner, right? And you have only a small number of elders that you can work with to keep your language alive. So we're trying to be sensitive to the needs both of the fluent speakers in everything they can accomplish, as well as what our non-fluent speakers need as they move forward with their training. As many people have said here, it's really hard for people to get away for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, whether it's in the summer, the winter, wherever. And so we've been moving in this past year towards developing a more flexible model that includes community-based course delivery. So our Community Linguist Certificate program, we are starting to deliver that this summer in Wabasca, which is a small community in northern Alberta. They had 10 students there who wanted to take it, and we said, well, it's ridiculous for all of you to fly down to Edmonton and stay there for 3 weeks. Let us come to you. And so we are being able to finding ways to be more flexible with the way that we deliver our courses, so that it's something we can do year-round and in different communities to reach a wider group of people. And then finally, just something I think is something for all of us to sort of keep in the back of our minds. There's so much experience and so much knowledge that I think has been developed since ALDI began, and then that we've used in all of our other institutes in different regions. But there's this issue of language revitalization is global, right? It's not just the States, it's not just Canada, it's not just North America. There are similar programs developing all throughout the world. So just in the past few months, I've been talking with folks in Pakistan, Ethiopia, Ecuador, Nigeria, where you have people starting little institutes, little language revitalization or language documentation institutes. And they are desperate to reach out for any help and any guidance that they can and how to get started on these things. And I think there's so much knowledge that we all have, everyone here in this room, about what the best practices are, what works and what doesn't, at least in our North American context. And then I see that one of our opportunities really is to engage with these other programs in the developing world, so that the struggles that we've gone through, they don't have to replicate them, right? That they can really benefit directly from what we've all learned in terms of what's the best way to revitalize our languages. And so that
when you come back are in this building upstairs, so you won't need that much time for lunch. So please respectfully give some time to our next speaker, Inez Slaughter. Now we're going to have more delays now. Also, just to remind you that we have the one room change for Where Are Your Keys? Evan Gardner's session will be in here instead of the regularly scheduled room, so you can note that in your program. Otherwise, all the rest of them are still in the various rooms. Also, we want to remind you that when you go in the smaller rooms, I know it's very tempting to take photographs. Photographs are fine if you ask permission of the presenter. Also now it's easier to collect somebody's PowerPoint by holding up your own notepad or iPad and filming them. Again, ask permission before you do that. And I know many of our speakers are more than happy to share their PowerPoints with you. So feel free to ask them, and they probably could do that for you while they're here.
Move this into a slideshow mode. I don't know if you see well.
Okay, Inez, you want to take this?
I think so. Thank you. 감사합니다. 안녕하세요. That's my greeting in my native language, and thank you for allowing me to present. I'll try to be quick. I want to thank ALDI for the invitation. And what do I push to go forward? Sorry. I'm a Mac person. This one. Okay, thank you. On the tables, there's a brochure about Indigenous Language Institute. So I'm just going to breeze through these things, where we're located, when we're founded, etc. Our mission, program focus, our philosophy. And what's important here is that we believe in assisting communities to produce speakers. And that's our neon sign. So wherever our programs take, we want to make sure that it is serving that basic philosophy. And we were charged with the panel discussion of what are the pedagogical trends, what are the language learning resources, and what is the status of native speakers. Really don't know what that all means, but here is the attempt in answering some of these questions. And how have these issues been reflected in the ILI's work since the passing of the NALA, Native American Languages Act, which was in 1990 and 1992. And what we saw is, of course, that instead of the normal and natural way of language being transmitted, we were all in the mode of teach the language. The languages had to be taught. And that required recruitment of speakers to be the teachers, but whether it's community-based or school-based. Then speakers needed to learn teaching methods, something very new. And we also noticed a trend that at the current moment, there's a lot of focus and shifting to the idea of pursuing language immersion, especially for the young ones. We seem to see a trend towards that. And this is very different from 1993 or even earlier when we were first in this together. And then we have seen, consequently, with the passing of NALA and the funds available through ANA, increase in the numbers of language programs, classes, and possibly teaching materials. I mean, at least that's what we've witnessed. So the question is, how are we doing and where are we today? Are we achieving what we set out to do? And I've had to really narrow down ILI's goals and focuses, particularly for these questions. We wanted to make sure the skills and tools, methods, all of the necessary, I guess tools is a good word, are in the hands of the community members. Whether they are teachers, family members, people in government, people who surround the learners. We want to see the tools in those people's hands so they establish a strong community that can sustain language programs. Also that, you know, when this language movement started, there were hardly any materials. We didn't have materials to teach our language, but necessary it became. Boy, I sound like something from Star Wars. It became necessary to find these, all right, Ophelia, that we needed more materials in the classrooms or wherever we're teaching. And our other goal is to eventually see language everywhere, every day, for and by everyone. When we visit a country, the language from that country is everywhere. And this is our vision, that in a nation, that the language becomes a very, very important cultural identity or a marker for that nation. And that is kind of what drives us in planning and helping communities achieve their goals. So expanding the training opportunities. So this is where we've learned a lot from Aldi. The training needs change and training trends change. And one of the things we're finding today is that there's a lot more demand for training amongst the new teachers, amongst the families who want to incorporate language in their work. So in 2010, we created the Consortium of Indigenous Language Organizations, ONLA, ALDI, ICLES, and ourselves. We're happy to include others if anybody's interested, by the way. What this did was, of course, increase the number of people we can pull from in terms of pools of instructors, pulling together intellectual information, also experiences, and through that we have developed workshops that we travel. We heard that not everybody can come to one place for a long period of time. So based on our experience, it was so convenient if we could take the workshops to the communities, as well as have regional ones where people from different communities come together. We will have one in end of June, where Jenny DeGroat and Andrea Ramon will be instructing immersion methods. With the regional ones, we have usually like 60 different communities, so 60 different languages, which helps to network, but also we learn that, oh my God, we learn to hear other languages and how that helps us to become learners, how it feels to be a learner of a language we're not familiar with. So there's a lot of benefit to that. And then we also promote the use of technology to create materials. Again, teaching the methodology and the tools and the templates into the communities so that they can create their own materials. We have seen communities where they have a whole room of new textbooks using that technology. They said, come in and see what you've done. So you walk in and there's a warehouse of textbooks for their community language program. And I said, wow, I mean, that's all you can say, right? And then support services. We've started very recently, actually, to emphasize immersion approach. We've seen communities teach their language in English. And we're talking about communities where they have teachers who are fluent in their language, but they somehow fall into the mode of teaching that language in English. And so we are helping communities to try to shift that model, that mode, so that it becomes immersion. And immersion is not explained as total. I mean, it all depends on the community. We also do consultation, the annual symposium, which attacks very, very hard to address topics that are challenges for communities. We also are a network center connecting people to people and organizations to organizations. And the Alliance with the Endangered Language Project, which is an online resource, there'll be a poster session on that. So the consequences of support services have been that we have seen more and more people requesting and going towards immersion. Let's see what it, oh yeah, so a healthy trend of closer networking amongst the language workers. And this happens not just in the United States, but we are seeing more networking globally. What this means is people can learn from each other and scaffold upon people's successes so that they're not repeating something that has already been done. So again, where do we want to go from here? We still need to see communities and individuals within the communities get engaged. Language programs start and a certain number of people become the program directors and language teachers. There are certain classes. That's still a small population of the community who are involved in that arena. And there's a sense of, oh good, our language is now being taught in our classes, in our schools. Whew, we're done. We don't have to worry. That is not quite the right balance. So we'd like to see more. How do we do this? How do we create more community engagement? We need to see more long-term support from tribal governing bodies, need for more effective language classes to retain learners. We've seen classes start with 30, in about 4 weeks, they're down to 5. Why? We have to be asking those questions. So our modest response are those things. Self-study of American Indian languages. I'll be talking more about that at the afternoon 3:30 or 3 o'clock session. Inform and educate how language use can expand outside classroom. Get outside of your boxes of classroom, classes, or language programs. Those are catchwords. It's actually traps in a sense. We've got to get out of there into everyday life. We have to educate our tribal leaders. They know it's important. Sometimes they know it's important. They want to do something, and very little time is spent on how they can help. So we'd like to see more education towards that population. And then giving learners the ownership. And this is where I call it learner-driven approach. And the self-study of American Indian languages promotes that. In the interest of time, I have to move on. Okay, so language learning resources. I didn't know what that meant in terms of this context, but so I defined it this way. Human resources, they're the most important. The speakers are the most important human resources for the work we do. We need materials, the material resources, which include funding, the different types of materials we need, space teachers, etc. Government, they could be the source of inspiration, and sometimes they are, as we know, the challenges towards where we need to go. Community as a resource, the engagement and the commitment of the community to support the work. And sometimes I think there's the feeling that I don't speak the language, so there's nothing I can do, and that is not true. You can become a learner. Maybe you're a good cook, or maybe you can help shuttle the kids to class or the adults. There are so many things involved in language revitalization that there's room for everybody. And then the next question is, where do we find these human resources? And they should be both the speakers and the learners. They are both very, very important resources. Our learners are our future speakers. And again, it's this idea of everybody needs to get involved. So it takes a village to nurture our language as a mantra. And school-based programs, short and long-term plans for language programming, teacher training, and it's been repeated many times how important that is. Okay, so the third question was what is the status of native speakers? So again, I thought, what is it that Ophelia wants from us here? So the definition of status, relative standing of someone or something, or the second meaning could be position of the affairs at a certain time. Speakers, as we mentioned, are our national treasures. All of you who are in the audience, who are speakers, you are national treasures. Nowhere else in the world are your languages spoken. So they are rare and few in number at the moment. There's an economic term called GDP, Gross Domestic Product. It's the total value of products and services produced within the territorial boundary of a country. It measures your wealth. So increasing the number of speakers basically strengthens your nation's cultural wealth. Again, honor both the fluent speakers and the learners. The fact that they're interested, that's a treasure. It's a very important resource. And where we see the current scale, it's still speaker and non-speaker. The scale is still less speakers. And we'd love to see that tip so that we have more speakers than non-speakers. That's the vision I have for all the communities. And I apologize for not having visuals, but I'm not good at PowerPoint, so it's one of these things which gets wordy. But I wanted to do this in the opening, but as a closing, I'd like to first say that I started with Indigenous Language Institute in 1995. And the first person I turned to was Dr. Ken Hale, the late Dr. Ken Hale. I said, we wanted to bring together as many people who are in the language work. There were just a few back then. And Virginia, Ophelia, Akira, several of you will pull to Santa Fe. And we had this meeting. And Ken is the one who said, you should use Ophelia and Akira as facilitators. And that is when our first contact with ILD began. And so we are very proud to be your sister. And we hope to continue with our work collectively. Thank you.
I want to thank all of the panelists this morning and also Daryl Baldwin for opening up our conference. The only thing I want to do with regard to Aldi's part of this panel, as you said, we were sort of the mother institute, but in a good way, always been a good mom, supporting and collaborating and trying to be as encouraging as possible to all of our family here. The one thing that I came away from all of the presenters this morning is something that we hear at ALDI all the time once our participants are getting ready to leave, especially the ones that have come to ALDI for the first time. And that is that this kind of experience, whether it's, if you consider it training or else meeting others and knowing that you're not alone in your efforts out there, that it is life-changing. And that's something that when Vincent said that about his little brother, it does change your life and makes you an advocate and makes you a practitioner and makes you a believer that you can do the work, say in the case of Daryl Baldwin and his family, it is possible. And these institutes are just simply support units there that can assist you in any way that's possible. The second thing I want to do as part of our ALDI presentation of this panel is to embarrass our friend and founder who always wants to remain in the background, and that is our founder. She's the woman who had the initiative, and actually for her it was just a dream or else just a way of trying to support her own teachers, and we look to her as the co-founder of ALDI, along with Leanne Hinton, that Vincent mentioned. Leanne Hinton and Lucille Wadahamaji were the two women who drafted the first proposal to try and find some funding. As Daryl said, if you want to make it sort of large, I mean, it doesn't cost anything to just speak the language, but when you want to expand and involve other components, it does take some funding. So Lucille Wadahamaji and Leanne Hinton were the ones who sent out the first proposal and got funding to start what has now become ALDI. So I want to embarrass her by introducing our founder, Lucille Wadahamaji. So Lucille, would you please stand? And Lucille will be presenting in a panel later on, so if you would make sure you introduce yourself to her. She's just here for today and tomorrow. Normally she teaches for us every summer. She's just been such an important person to us when we come together here at this campus. So with that, again, lunch is on your own, and it's all, eating facilities are all in this building. And then the breakout sessions, the smaller sessions, are also in this building on the fourth floor, except for the one that is here. So have a nice lunch and have fun in the smaller sessions. And we'll see you all at dinner time. Make sure you bring your name tag in order to get to the dinner. Thank you.